Welcome to Life, Lessons, and Laughter with your host, Glenn Ambrose.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. So today we've got a serious topic, which I guess all of them are, but this one's, it's heavy. I know it's difficult. It's one of those things that's very hard to process, and it hurts the ones we leave behind. I've had so many friends commit suicide. It's unfortunate, and I've attempted it and spent years praying for it. So it's something, that it's to me, it's a particular space that you drop into. And once you drop into it, it's kind of the go back place whenever crap hits the fan. Not always. But it's just, to me, it seems like it's quite a bit easier to get there once you've seriously been there. I think that a lot of people have suicidal thoughts, which oftentimes are just that, just thoughts. And of course, that's not good. I recommend talking to somebody if that's happening. But it's also, I think, an aspect of life. We understand we're mortal and we're experiencing things that we don't like. So, of course, at some point, the idea of leaving this reality that seems like it's causing all this suffering is going to pop into your head, So, like I said, I think that having suicidal thoughts and really being suicidal are two different things, and this is my opinion. I actually did do a little research, which I never do, just for about 5 or 10 minutes, just so I could share some stats about this. But before I do, I just kind of want to finish that thought. It's like, I'm trying to think of another example that I can use to compare it to. I guess maybe like a work environment. Okay, so let's say you don't like your job, or you don't like the way that your boss talks to you, right? And this transpires over years and years. And at first you rationalize it, why it's no big deal, or that doesn't bother you that much, or you can take it, or whatever. And then over the years, the more it happens, the more you just want to quit. You just want to leave your job. Right. So that's a progression. So what I mean is, like, so if let's say it takes you a year before you actually get to the point where you say, you know what, I'm sick of dealing with this. I just want to quit. Let's say, you go through all your rationalizations and it gets worse and worse, and you take it more and more seriously each time. And then after a year, you're like, I want to quit my job. Now, from that point on, quitting your job is usually going to be popping into your mind fairly early, because you don't have to go through that year of rationalizing and trying to figure out what you want to do, and if you like it, if you don't like it, or trying something else or whatever. You just go, whenever it happens, you just go straight to, I want to quit. I want to quit. Because that's kind of like the most extreme step. So it takes us a while to work down to the most extreme step. But once we get there, it seems like the all those steps above it were just almost a waste of time, or they're not as extreme. So why even contemplate them again? It's not like, in after month 2, you tell yourself, well, maybe my boss will stop talking to me like this after a while. Well, after a year, you're not going to use that same reasoning and say, oh, well, maybe my boss was going to stop talking to me like this after a while. Like, because you've already been there. You've already worked through that. You already found out it wasn't true. So you're just going to go straight to I quit. See, this is how it works with suicide. It takes a while to get to the suicidal place, because it's really not natural. It goes against nature to take our own lives. So to get all the way there, it takes time and suffering and struggling. But once you get there, it's much easier to go back to that state of mind, because what are you going to do? Like, oh, things will get better. You can only tell yourself that for so long, right? And I'm not saying this to bring people down and say there's no hope. It's actually the opposite. I'm trying to help those people who haven't experienced this, maybe a little bit of understanding. So, because I think that there's a certain level of compassion around suicide, and rightfully so. But I think that there's a lack of understanding, which means that the compassion is coming from just this desire to be a good person, which is nice, but it's not true compassion. You can't really have compassion for somebody unless you understand. That's the root of compassion, is understanding. Not necessarily experiencing the same thoughts, but just like I tried to explain, if you can understand it and go, oh yeah, I felt that way about a job. So, okay, now I understand that once a person really dives into depression deeply enough to where they get to a place where they're truly suicidal, then they're more likely to go straight to that suicidal place when things take a nosedive in the future. Oh, okay. Because people act like it's this, when somebody commits suicide or is suicidal, like, what? How did this happen? Oh my God, I didn't see it coming. Well, yeah, it's because we're looking from the outside. We can't compare our insides to other people. We can't compare our insides to other people's outsides. Okay. So if I'm sitting there on the inside and I'm not battling depression at the moment, and I'm not suicidal, and I look at somebody else and they're walking down the street, I go, oh, they're just walking down the street. I'm walking down the street, so they must just be walking down the street. I'm actually feeling happy today because I'm just walking down the street. Oh, they must be feeling happy today because they're walking down the street. No, that's not how it works. They could be in huge depression. How would you know? How would you possibly know what's going on inside somebody else? So one, I think this is two-part. One, take some of the pressure off yourself that, of course you didn't see the signs if they weren't showing them. It's not, when somebody commits suicide, that's an internal battle inside of them. It's not other people around them's fault. So one, take the pressure off yourself. Oh, I should have seen the signs and all this stuff. People hide it well. But by the same token, if like we know somebody's battled with severe depression and suicidal thoughts in the past, then even though, like, let's say things aren't going too well in their life, we might be like, hey, you know what? They experienced this before. They're going through a rough time. Who knows? Maybe they're experiencing it again now. Maybe not, but maybe. Maybe I'll check on it. You know, so this is what understanding does. I think it induces more correct action. You know, it doesn't mean we want to look at people who battle depression and suicidal tendencies you know, as ill, as messed up, as every time something goes wrong that means they're suicidal. No, not necessarily. You know, hopefully, especially if they're working through it in a healthy way, learning better ways to interact with life in a more realistic and healthy way. Hopefully, you know, but we might not see the signs either. So anyway, I just think that's an important thing that I don't think a lot of people understand, that it's very easy to get back there. So I'll kind of wrap up this portion with this mentality. The reason I say that is it's to kind of create a bigger picture of the suicide. It's not just one thing or even one moment in time. Often, you know, like I'm 56 now, and I just lost two very close friends in the last 7 years. I mean, two of my closest friends that I've ever had in my life in the last 7 years to suicide. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. So this is obviously difficult. So I'm going to share some of the stuff that I researched. So suicide is the biggest killer of people under the age of 35. The biggest killer of people under the age of 35. And the biggest killer of men under the age of 50. So under 35, the number one thing that ends people's lives is suicide. The number one thing under the age of 35 years old. And then if you go up to 50, so think about this. You know, this is obviously has something to do with age. I mean, as far as our bodies breaking down and illnesses and all that stuff, right? So up until we're 35, we have less illnesses, less disease, less stuff like that. And when that stuff doesn't jack up and start taking people's lives, when things are just kind of as they are, the biggest killer of people, men and women, people, is suicide. And the biggest killer of men under the age of 50. So, you know, the statistics for men are dramatically higher, anywhere from 2 to 4 times women. I think the average number that I saw was men are 74% more likely to commit suicide than women. So it's like 26% women, 74% men. So I wonder why that could be. So here it says, among other things, a person contemplating suicide may feel sadness or grief, shame, worthlessness, intense guilt, rage, or desire to seek revenge. They are a burden to others. They have no worth or value. That life is not worth living. That they are trapped either physically or emotionally. That things will never get better. Intense physical or emotional pain. This is what people are feeling when they're heading towards suicide. So these are like the symptoms, okay? Those are the symptoms, because something has to cause those feelings. Like, people aren't just walking around in sadness and shame and worthlessness and intense guilt and rage and feeling like they're a burden or have no worth or value, or that they're trapped, or life isn't worth living, that things will never get better. People don't, that just doesn't magically happen. That's not our normal state. So something has to get people to be feeling like this. So if something, this one of the reasons, the things that I want to get across in this is that we often treat the symptom. We don't treat the cause. If somebody has a headache, then they take an aspirin to get rid of the pain. It's like, well, what's causing the headache in the first place? We're so indoctrinated by that. And I think it's one of the reasons why we don't take responsibility for our lives. We live in such unhealthy ways because we just take a pill. We just assume that there's something inherently wrong with us, just magically happened. And we have to take a pill to get us back to our normal state. We have to take an unnatural pill to get us back to our normal state. We never look for the reason that we're sick in the first place. Okay? So I just explained these types of things that we're feeling when we're heading towards suicidal thoughts. Now, what's the opposite of that? Like, what do you experience when you're not feeling down? Like, what's the opposite of these negative feelings? Well, happiness, peace, contentment, things like that, right? Now, when does our body create those? They're endorphins, So endorphins, the happiness hormones, they are associated with the feeling of enchantment. Dopamine, which is produced when we feel satisfied, resulting in feeling happy, excited, and stimulated. Oxytocin, which is linked to relationships and helps us to build bonds with other human beings. So our body creates all these hormones, all these endorphins that make us feel good when we are feeling satisfied, when we're in relationships and building bonds with other human beings. So when we're interacting with life in a satisfying way, when we do things that make us happy, when we live in a way that creates the release of these endorphins, then they are literally the anti-suicide chemicals that are naturally within our body, right? So instead of looking at, like this kind of sparked, I guess, this podcast it's this idea of mental illness. I just don't think that suicide is mental illness. I don't think it's a result of mental illness. I mean, of course, in certain people here and there. But I mean, like we said, this is the number one killer of people under 35 and men under 50. This is rampant. This happens all the time, consistently. A lot more than car accidents or heart attacks or anything else. Literally anything you can imagine, anything in your imagination, anything you've ever heard of that kills people, and there's a lot of them, suicide beats them all. So this isn't a problem with people. Like people aren't just being born with an absence of endorphins that make them feel happy. Like it's not like you're walking down the street and you trip and scratch your knee and then all of a sudden your body doesn't produce endorphins. This is rampant in our society. This is happening all the time, consistently to lots of people. Okay, so if that's the case, then it's not an illness. It's not like, oh, look, 3/4 of the people on the planet, not 3/4 of the people on the planet, of course, more let where the problem is not that we're like tons of people are being born without the ability to produce endorphins. Like I guarantee, nobody studies this because there's no money in it, but like nobody goes back and studies like well, maybe they do study the endorphin, but they don't put it into a study like this. Not that I've seen anyway. Hey, if they did, great. So but like, I think this is a logical way of studying things. If you go, okay, well, if all these people are committing suicide and they're feeling down, that means they're not feeling up. Well, what are people that are feeling up? Like, what's happening in their bodies? Well, there's these endorphins being released. Okay, why are those endorphins released? Well, because of a satisfying way of life. Okay, so there's a satisfying way of life. So like what endorphins are released in a child's body at a very young age, a baby, and at 10 and at 20 years old and at 40 years old. Like what's the average endorphin production? I guarantee you're going to be seeing it drop. Any happiness endorphins are going to drop the older people get. So it's not our normal state, and it's not an illness. It's what happens to us when we're living life. Why? Well, look at the life that we're living. Okay? So what I mean by that is this. It's we're living under constant stress, financial concerns, nonstop work, incessant busyness, and unhealthy eating. The foods. I mean, it's when I found out what I've been putting in my body living in the United States, up until 4 years ago, it's mind-boggling to me that this stuff is even legal. It's obvious that our government and the FDA has zero interest in the health of its people. And you can see that in the decline of the health in people in the United States and the life expectancy dropping. Go check that out. So, and it ain't because of suicide. So, or some of it actually probably is. But a lot of the foods that have been passed by the FDA are illegal in other countries, because they kill people consistently. So they ban them in other states. These companies actually, I don't know if you all know this, but companies, large companies like I believe Kraft and some of the other ones, they literally make multiple types of food for the different countries. So like the food that is made for most countries is made of certain ingredients, because if they don't, they can't sell them there because they're illegal. In the United States, they can use whatever they want, basically, because it's a moneymaker. So, and they fund the FDA. So what they do is they just make one version of the food that's crap, that probably has the biggest markup, because it's all unnatural ingredients and easy. So they do that and they sell it to the people in the United States, and then they sell the healthier version everywhere else, or whatever countries, they don't allow poison in their foods, to them, which is mind-boggling to me that this is actually that this is common knowledge and allowed, and our government is just like, no. The fact that these companies fund the FDA has no impact on their decision making. Anyway, let's get off that road. So my point is we have to stop normalizing a dysfunctional way of life, and then labeling people that struggle with this dysfunctional way of life as ill. Oh, they have a mental illness. There's something wrong with them. Really? There's something wrong with them, because they're having an extreme problem living under constant stress, financial concerns, nonstop work, incessant busyness, and unhealthy eating. And if you can't do that, then you're ill. There's something wrong with you. Really? I disagree. Yesterday I was just driving home, and I stopped at this little farm stand on the side of the road that I'd driven by 1,000 times and never stopped, in the Dominican Republic up in the mountains. And I stopped by and I grabbed like 5 or 6 bananas and a big old avocado. Now, I don't have to worry about the pesticides, stuff like this. It's natural. Some of the stuff grows right on the property that I live on. So I get that, and they charge me 100 pesos, which is like $1.67 in the United States money. I go home, cut an avocado in half, and spoon it out. There's food all around us. Well, there can be, depending on where you live. That's actually healthy, but we fill our bodies with these toxins and think it has no effect over 30 or 40 years. Again, it's the way of life, and food is just a small portion of it. Honestly, I don't eat as clean as I could, even to this day. By far, my diet could be much better. However, I am working on it, and I've worked on these other areas of my life. Like in recovery, they talk about addiction as being maladjusted to life. So which I agree with. It's, we're maladjusted to life. We haven't figured out how to interact with life in a healthy way. Now, I think that it's extremely, the reason that so many people are maladjusted to life is because life is so maladjusted to normality. It's not normal to live like this, and we're just slowly boiling to death. It's like we don't understand it because we're in it. It's a bit like trying to explain water to fish. Like if you tell people like the way you live is not normal, they're like, what way that I live? And they're going so fast and so busy that they can't even stop to think about it, and it would challenge every way that they live their life. So they don't really want to. And then on an unconscious level, it's very easy for them to push aside and not think about, which I think is why it perpetuates. It's like I mean, if you take, I'm going to say the average person is the average person that's not struggling with suicidal thoughts, because half the people who are the average person are. So half the people that are not struggling with suicidal thoughts, hey, maybe they go through their difficulties. I'm sure that they do, right? I mean, I don't consider myself suicidal, so I guess I'm one of those now. So like, it's not, but I'm not really one of the people that we're talking about either. I try to look at life and really work on the way that I interact with life, and I try not to go with the norm. It's actually the opposite. I try not to go with the norm. Specifically, like if I recognize myself thinking and behaving in a way that most people think and behave, that scares me. That's a red flag that says, whoa, Glenn, you better slow down and look at things, because most people are unhappy and a large portion of them are committing suicide. So if you interact with life the way that they're interacting with life, and you have a suicidal background, you're probably going to end back up in suicidal thoughts, which I don't want. Or at worst, at best, I'm going to end up unhappy. So no, but most people, like, let's just take most people that are interacting with life to some degree as what they would call functional. Most people would probably consider it healthy. They're making it, they're going through that. They got a good job. Maybe 2 incomes in the house, probably need it nowadays, especially, you got 2 decent sized incomes, probably, above 75 grand a year. So you got 150 grand coming in minimum, a lot much higher than that in the US and other countries. So, you got that, hey, you got a nice house, you got the things that you want, you got a couple cars, if your kid wants to play a sport, they play, it's not an issue. You got all this stuff going on, and you go, hey, do you think, like, people are committing suicide because the life is dysfunctional? They're like, no, they're just having trouble dealing with it. So one part of that is these people have found a way to interact with a dysfunctional way of life without it overburdening them emotionally, which is really good, depending on how you look at it, depending on what you want out of life. Wow, I just had this cool flash of different types of people, but that's cool. That's good for you. There's nothing wrong with living that life. I mean, heck, you're experiencing a fair amount of happiness. You have a lot of nice things. Life's good. And that's good if you can do that, especially in a dysfunctional world. So kudos. But let's be realistic with it. It's still dysfunctional. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be realistic, because, the people who interact in a dysfunctional world, in one way you look at that, does that mean they're dysfunctional? It's a dysfunctional world, right? So in a way, yeah, but in a way, they found a way to navigate this world where it doesn't bring them down, and that's to be commended. So kudos to them for figuring out a way to navigate life, a dysfunctional life, a highly dysfunctional society. The way we live life is highly dysfunctional. We work way too much. We're way too busy. There's way too much pressure. It's just, I think that's a fact. So if you found a way to navigate that without it bringing you down, like, wow, kudos to you. Way to go. But one of the other things is, and another way to look at that, and I don't want to blend these two because I don't want to demonize anybody that has found a way to interact with life in a healthy manner, because I think that really deserves kudos. And I mean that. So to me, it's not an either or. It's not like they're either doing the right thing or they're doing the wrong thing. It can't be both. Yeah, it can be both. It's just different perspectives. So one perspective is kudos. Another perspective is they drank the Kool-Aid and they're not dealing with reality. They're not looking at life going, like, and perhaps it's a level of sensitivity. People are different. So some people can figure out ways of dealing with life. Maybe they don't think too much. Overthinking is a huge cause of stress. Maybe they don't think too much. Maybe they just don't take it too far. Who knows what they found ways to navigate it, is like I said before. So that's great. But if the way that they handle life, okay, does not include, maybe this is the way to phrase it, if the way they handle life does not include the reality that life is dysfunctional, then I think that they're missing a part of it. Like if they walk around thinking life is, there's like nothing wrong with the way people live, then I think that's delusional. I think that is not facing reality. I think that's just kind of not looking at the obvious and pretending it's not there. So, which, hey, if all you're trying to do is get through this life, I guess that can be a technique. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for a lot of other people, but it does work for some. And I think maybe if it works, then maybe it's a good thing. I'm not saying everybody has to, this, I guess this is where I differ. Like a lot of the arguments I see are based in this type of thing where people go, oh no, if people aren't dealing with reality, then they have their head in the sand and they're part of the problem and all this stuff. No, man, if you're going through your life, like in a, somehow you found a way to function in a dysfunctional world and you're fairly happy and you're like, hey man, good for you. Quite honestly, I don't care if you're delusional. If it's working for you, man, be delusional. But the reality is our society is whacked. It was like when what's his name? Yogananda came over to the United States in 1920. He said, it's difficult to teach people in the United States about spirituality because they can't slow down enough to take in the information about spirituality. They can't. They're just moving too fast. The pace of life is too fast here. That was in 1920. We're in 2024. That's more than 100 years since then. You know how fast life is going now in 2024 compared to 1920? My God. The speed has had to at least double, I would imagine, if not more. It's just constant go, 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 right? So I think this is what we need to look at is the way our way of life is dysfunctional. And this is what's inducing all this suicide. It's not because people are ill, there's something wrong with them. It's that there's something wrong with the pressures of living life the way most people live life. It's not normal. Like I've said this before, like, I see these examples of these intentional communities with hundreds of people living there. And oftentimes a lot less than hundreds. Sometimes 10 people or more. And these people are living in these communities, and what they found is if they just get a little piece of land and they start growing food and maintaining what they need to maintain, that you can work about an average of 3 or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So like 15 to 20 hours a week, each person, and you keep the whole community going. Like that's enough energy to water whatever you need to water, cook whatever you need to cook, clean whatever you need to clean. Whatever, the requirements for life, it's enough. So can you imagine if the average person only had to work for, let's just say 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, 25 hours a week was towards work? I mean, could you spend more time with your kids? Could your kids go play all the time? Maybe expose your children to alternative things that they might like. Instead of, and we have kids sitting in school longer than that at the highest energy levels, just sitting there learning most of the stuff they're never going to use. Well, most of the kids, some of them will use it. Boy, the ones that take to education like that, I think it's great. It's cool to me because, like, you see, like, I've never really enjoyed school. I stopped liking school in 3rd grade. I just don't learn in that format. I didn't struggle with learning or getting the grades. It was a piece of cake. I just didn't like it. It just seemed meaningless to me. So, but the people who, they're kind of like those lifelong students, or people that just graduate with a bachelor's and they're like, oh, of course I'm going for my master's. Of course I'm going for my doctorates. Like there's not even any thought into it. It's just they're doing what jives with them. Like that's a certain group of people, which is great. School's great for them. But most, I think that we'd have a lot more. I guess what is our goal in society? I think it should be to be happy, because if you're not happy, what do you have? Your health. Well, I know a lot of people have killed themselves that have had their health. Well, a relationship. Now, a lot of relationships don't work if you're not happy. And even if you're still in them, you're not happy. So you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting out of a relationship. If you're not happy, then your relationship isn't strong enough, or it's not, or it takes more than just that to create enough endorphins to help us live a happy life. So relationships aren't enough. Health isn't enough. Money. It's obvious that money isn't enough. I mean, there's plenty of miserable people with tons of money. Plenty of rich people that commit suicide. So it's not. So money, health, relationships, none of that is more important than happiness. If you have happiness, you can use those things as an expression of that happiness. Your health. Oh my God, if you're healthy and you're happy, you can go do all kinds of stuff. If you're happy and you have money, you can go enjoy all kinds of experiences and help other people. If you're happy and you're in a relationship, oh wow, that's an enjoyable relationship. You see, happiness is the most important thing. It's numero uno. It has to be. It can't be work and then wonder why most people aren't happy. It's because we're not. See, this is what it comes down to, is we look at life and we go, okay, what have we accomplished in the last 100 years, 200 years? What have we accomplished? Amazing technological feats, right? Amazing architect and buildings into the sky and sending somebody to the moon and all kinds of AI and cell phones and computers and the technology we've invented and created amazing things. Why? Because we put energy towards doing that, and we did it. Why? Because we put energy towards doing that. right? But we're just putting our energy out blindly. We're just, yeah, let's, if we're creating things is good. Like I think it was the Celestine Prophecy in that book. It was really cool because they flashed out at like moments of human history, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but like towards the technological revolution, the science, we got to a point where we're always looking for the meaning of life and understanding why we're here in the world around us, and we created science to help us with that. And we went out and science has created all this technology and understandings and all these advancements, right? And that, like I said, that's really cool and everything. But like I think, it explains, like, we kind of forgot why we got into science in the first place. Like, what's the point? Just making more new stuff? Why? Like, if we're unhappy, why? Like I said, happiness has to be the number one thing. And we don't put any energy towards happiness. We forgot our why. Our why, I think possibly why we got into science was to find the meaning of life and to understand the world around us so we can enjoy life more. Otherwise, why? What's the point of understanding things? What's the point in accomplishing things if it's not going to bring joy and happiness? Just to say we did it? Well, that's part of the problem, is we never feel like we're good enough. Even after all our accomplishments, most people are feeling like they're not enough. So it's not, the way we're doing it is not inciting happiness. So we have to get back to that question. We have to get back to, what's the point of it all? What's the point? The United States has a defense budget that's like 20, what is it? It's more than the next like 25 countries underneath combined. So we're putting energy towards that. So you see, whatever we put energy towards, we accomplish. So we accomplish technological feats, we accomplish a gigantic military, we accomplish a gigantic government, we accomplish money and power funneling upwards and getting diminished to the masses. We accomplish all that stuff. Why? Like, if you want to see where our energy is going, just look at what's being done. All of what's been done in the last 100 years is accomplishment based. It's funneling money based. It's whatever has been accomplished, it's because we put energy towards it. What hasn't been accomplished in the last 100 years? Are people getting happier? No. Why? Because we're not putting energy towards it. Have we solved any of the world's problems? No. Why? Because we're not putting any energy towards it. Peace is not our goal in war. Fighting is our goal in war. Money is our goal in war. And what are we achieving fighting? Yes. Are we achieving money? Yes. Are we achieving power? Yes. Okay, well, then that concludes that's where our energy is going, because we're accomplishing it. That's what we're doing that. So that tells us, if you want to know what's important to people, just watch what gets accomplished. And if we say technology is important, advancement is important, war is important, funneling money upwards and power is important. How do I know that? Because it is what's being done. It's where the energy is going. How do I know that it's where the energy is going? Because it's being done, because that's what's being accomplished. You can't accomplish something without trying to accomplish it. You can't accomplish things without putting energy towards it to accomplish it. So it's not this magical mystery tour on why we're accomplishing all this stuff. It's because we're putting energy towards it. Are we solving any of the world's problems? Are people getting happier? No. Why? It's because we're not putting any energy towards it. It's that simple. We must look at our lives and go, where is my energy going? My energy is going to make money and to become part of a cog in a machine and stay busy as humanly possible and have a bunch of nice things. Okay. None of that stuff really releases much endorphins. So you're sacrificing your happiness. And I'm not saying that you have to sacrifice like having nice things or anything to accomplish this. Like, that's the cool part. The cool part is you can basically keep 90% of your life the way it is and take 10% of your energy away from the accomplishments and the money and the busyness and just put it towards happiness, and you're good. You're fine. We would change the entire world. So it's not about changing our entire lives. It's just about making happiness a portion of it. And we're not going to do that if we keep normalizing a dysfunctional way of life and saying that people that can't live in that life are ill. They have a mental illness. Their brain is sick. That's what mental illness means: a sick brain, a sick mind. There's something wrong with their mind. No, there's nothing wrong with their mind. There's something wrong with the way society teaches them to live. It's not normal. It's sick. It's dysfunctional and it's sick. And they're having a hard time navigating that. Which they should. I mean, like I said, hey, kudos to the people who can handle it in a dysfunctional way. There's no judgment here. God bless you if you're having a somewhat happy life. Praise be. I'm extremely happy for you. But just because other people aren't doesn't mean that they're sick. That's my point. It's not either or. It's not comparing. It's just going, there's not something wrong with people who can't fit into a dysfunctional world. If we plant a seed and the seeds don't grow, we look at the soil and go, what's wrong with the atmosphere? These seeds aren't growing. Like, like a bunch of seeds. Like, this isn't a couple seeds that might have a problem with a couple. This isn't a couple seeds. This is the number one cause of death in people under 35 and men under 50. Number one. So this isn't a couple seeds. This is tons of seeds. If you have tons of seeds and they're not growing, you're going to check the soil and go, okay, well, is there the right nutrients in it? Are they receiving the correct warmth, the correct water? Are they getting what they need? No, they're not. They're not getting what they need. That's why they're not blossoming. Oh, okay. So maybe we can enhance the atmosphere that they're in, because these seeds aren't capable of blossoming in a dysfunctional soil. We have a dysfunctional soil, people. And like I said, it's, the beautiful part is like, we don't have to change the whole world tomorrow, but we have to stop normalizing a dysfunctional way of life and then saying that people who can't live in it are sick. They're not. There's nothing wrong with them. They just have to live life. I mean, of course, helping deal with life it's going to help to some degree, but it's not going to solve the problem. It's how they live their life. And it's it would affect all of us. So and I'll end with this. It's not just about the people committing suicide, right? Obviously, that's what this podcast was about. I want to get this stigma away that there's something wrong with people, that it's an illness, because in my opinion, it's not. But so I just kind of explain the obvious about how this impacts people that are suicide prone. Excuse me. If they're really having a difficult time interacting with life, sure, you can try to teach them some tools to interact with a dysfunctional life, but a better thing would be to do is to teach them how to create a life that is actually functional, that goes along with natural things, like things that release their endorphins, have those naturally, and then they won't have a lack of those endorphins. Wow. But like, so of course this is going to help people with suicidal tendencies, but it's also going to help the people who don't have, like, it's going to help everyone, even those people that are actually adjusted to life, even though it's dysfunctional. If they start changing their life, like they're okay now, maybe even let's just say they're fairly happy. They're going to be extremely happy if they make these same adjustments to their lives. If they start putting in energy to just live a lifestyle that's more in alignment with nature, that's less busy, that induces more positive endorphins, that is more love-based. If we all start just putting more energy towards creating a life, like, we can still accomplish all this stuff. Like I said, if we took 90%, if we left life this basically the same as far as how we spent our energy, 90% of the time, we would still accomplish 90% of the technological advances and all that stuff. So basically, life basically stays the same as far as all the things we think are important, which kind of aren't, but that's another story. And then just tweak it 10% about what's expected of us, how many hours we work, and just how we look at life, keeping up with the Joneses, how unnecessary it is to spend $10,000 for a soccer camp, or whatever. Like, if we just normalize like 10% of this stuff, we could still accomplish everything that we wanted in 10% more time, except everybody to be happy, much happier. This is what I'm talking about, peeps. So hopefully that helps. All right, I got to wrap it up. Peace. Thanks for listening. I will talk with you soon.